representatives of the Alliance of the Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice, with Ms Anna Kavanagh, Convenor and Petitioner, Dr Finbar Markey, Secretary, and Ms Michelle Monaghan, Lead Researcher with regard to public petitions number P00035/22, Amend Child Care Act 1991 to provide HICA with the necessary powers to sanction Tusla, Child and Family Agency, when it fails to meet its statutory obligations for the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaign for Justice. So, on behalf of the committee, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the witnesses. I would give you your name and stars again today. Ms Anna Kavanagh, Convenor and Petitioner, Dr Finbar Markey, Secretary, and Ms Michelle Monaghan, Lead Researcher. Ms Anna Kavanagh will read out her opening statement, followed by the other two witnesses, and I suggest that this joint opening statement should last for around 10 minutes. We will then have questions and comments from members, and each member would have around 10 minutes, depending on how many members are here, and members may speak more than once. So I now call on Ms Kavanagh to start the opening statement, followed by Dr Markey and Ms Monaghan, and thank you, Ms Kavanagh.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to appear before you today on behalf of the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice. My name is Anna Kavanagh and I'm co-founder and convener to the Alliance. I'm joined by our Secretary, Dr Finbar Markey, and by our Lead Researcher, Michelle Monaghan. We welcome the opportunity your committee is giving us to discuss the difficulties with Tusla experienced by the mothers that we represent. The Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice was set up in June 2019 and is currently Ireland's largest non-Tusla funded, non-state funded advocacy group for mothers in difficulties with Tusla, the Gardaí and the family court. In fact, we receive no funding. We work in a voluntary capacity and the occasional expenses that we incur are met entirely out of our own pockets. We are currently going through a shameful period in Irish history where women and children who are being abused by the state are silenced by the in-camera rule operating in the family court that denies them their constitutional right to speak out about what is happening to them. We are their voice here today to articulate their grievances and their hope of reforms that will give them the justice they are currently denied. The dysfunction in Tusla that is leading to the failure to protect some of the children that they have taken into state care is hiding in plain sight. Among the headlines and the bylines from this year alone, the Irish Examiner, the 28th of May, Tusla reports doubling of children in state care who may have been targeted for sexual exploitation. The Irish Times, May 27th, when it comes to the state's most vulnerable children, we don't seem to learn from our failures. And that is an opinion piece that appeared in the Irish Times from Dr. Carol Corter, who is the director of the Child Law Project. The Irish Examiner, the 21st of May, it's taken 7 to 8 years for child sexual abuse cases to get to court because of ongoing problems in sharing data between the Gardaí and Tusla. The front page of the Irish Independent on the 21st of May. Children held in care for twice as long as the legal limit. RTE, the 9th of May. Babies in state care placed in private unregulated settings. The Irish Examiner, the 28th of April. Almost 30 children in state care have disappeared this year, with the whereabouts of 22 still unknown. The Limerick Post, the 13th of April. Tusla is taking 2 years to investigate sexual abuse. Irish Times, the 25th of March. Internal Tusla documents reveals cases of children in emergency accommodation contracting scabies and living in rooms with bed bugs. The Irish Times, the 27th of March. Why are we still so badly failing children in care? This is another opinion piece in the Irish Times from Dr. Carol Coulter. The Irish Times, the 25th of March. Children in emergency state care at risk of abuse. The Irish Mail, the 3rd of March. The state spent 70 million on unsuitable housing for children in care. The Irish Mail, the 1st of March. Tusla spent 14 million placing children with unvetted firms. The Irish Examiner, the 28th of February. A Garda investigation is underway into allegations Tusla placed vulnerable children into unregulated emergency accommodation. The Irish Examiner, the 22nd of January. Unvetted care workers subcontracted by Tusla were given access to vulnerable children at risk of abuse. The Irish Independent, the 15th of January. Baby in foster care not seen by social workers for 10 months due to staff pressures, inspectors reveal. And that referred to a HICWA report. Irish Independent, the 15th of January. Judges rage over boy 15 years old in care who hadn't had even one day of school since primary. Irish Times, the 8th of January. Tusla delays may have put children at risk, HICWA finds. This is just a sample of headlines, and together they paint a grim picture of the dysfunction in the Child and Family Agency, which Finbar will appraise further. We would like to acknowledge the work of the reporters who have been shining a spotlight on Tusla since it began operating just over 10 years ago, including Kitty Holland, Debbie McCann and Jack Power, to name but a few. There was great expectation that in taking over the role of child welfare and protection from the HSE, Tusla would end the dysfunction in the system stretching back several decades. Alas, this hasn't materialised, and Michelle is going to elaborate on this. The message I want to deliver to you here today from the mothers on whose behalf we are speaking is that behind these headlines are heartbroken mothers, battered and bruised by the agents of the state who are failing to protect them and their children. The great scandal of our time is the failure to hold Tusla to account for its failure to protect children it has taken into state care from sexual abuse and sexual exploitation. Tusla does not have a centralised database on the number of children in state care that go missing, nor does it have a centralised database on the number of babies a few days old that it takes into state care. Last year, I interviewed 20 mothers at length about their experience of Tusla and got 20 ladies to do the voiceovers to protect their anonymity for a podcast series called Justice for Birth Mothers. The headlines above refer to children missing from state care and the failure to protect children in state care from sexual abuse. This is what Muriel, not her real name, told me. My daughter went missing out of foster care. I got a tip-off that she was missing and that she was being sexually abused in the foster home, and Tusla was notified and the guards knew about it. I was not notified that my daughter was missing out of the foster home. It was an anonymous call that I got from a mother from the school because videos of my daughter had gone around the school on Snapchat. She was found in a very isolated rural area miles away from the foster home, and there was no bus link there, so she would have had to have been brought there in a car. I was told by Tusla she had a boyfriend. She went there to see a boy, but my daughter was just 13 years old at the time. So someone who can drive with a 13-year-old, to me, is an adult man with a vulnerable child. There was absolutely no investigation done. A male Tusla social worker picked her up and drove her back to the foster home. When I raised this issue in court, the male Tusla social worker gave evidence to the judge, which the judge accepted, that she didn't want to talk about the incident. I was forbidden then by the judge to ask any questions. In summary, Tusla's failure to protect children it takes into state care is hiding in plain sight, captured by mainstream headlines on an almost daily basis. Behind these headlines are mothers like Muriel and their children, silenced by the in-camera rule, unable to speak out about the effects of Tusla's failures on them and their children. There's an unbroken chain of state abuse of mothers and children that did not end with the closure of the last mother and baby home. The state abuse of mothers and children is ongoing. We excuse past generations for their failure to speak out at the time because it was generally not fully known what was happening. Future generations will never forgive us if we don't bring an immediate end to the state abuse of mothers and children, because we know and we appear to be doing very little to halt it. It's beyond my level of competency to tell you what the solution is. My purpose coming before you today is to articulate the cries of the mothers that we represent in the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice, and appeal to your better natures to act immediately to bring about an end to this injustice. Silence is complicity. To conclude, we welcome any questions that the committee may have for us. And I now hand you over to Finbar.
Thank you for that, Anna. Can I thank everybody that's in attendance today, both elected representatives and staff here. My name is Finbar Markey. I've worked in the social care field and with adolescents in the residential care for over a decade. I hold an honours degree in applied social care, and I have a master's degree and a research PhD researching organisational culture change in public health and social care in Ireland. The organisational culture of Tusla is clearly in need of a serious overhaul. The failings that are identified by HICWA's less than satisfactory assessment procedures, coupled with the experiences of mothers in contact with our alliance, point to an organisational culture evolved from crisis and pathological in many aspects of its practices. The espoused beliefs and values of the organisation, the ethical aspirations that are reduced into promising slogans we see in marketing campaigns, in many instances are not to be found in actual practice. The real-time culture of an organisation can be shielded from public view and external assessment through naive faith in espoused beliefs and myth-based slogans or go-to explanations of failure, such as there's no funding, and oversight procedures that are dependent on quantitative statistical data over qualitative assessment tools. The compulsion within a failing organisation, and indeed by high-ranking members of staff, to conceal and to redirect blame, to defend themselves at all costs, creates a pathology within organisations that manifests toxic environments and reduces the service user to a problem status. It is clear that the organisational culture of Tusla is woefully incongruent. The basic principles of the organisation, such as the protection of children, is not being achieved in many instances. Equally, the founding principle of aiming to keep families together has long been forgotten. Tusla, or whatever organisation replaces Tusla into the future, must go through a rebirthing process, a return to the espoused values and principles of the organisation, and a rejection of the self-protectionism and the abuses that have brought us here to appear before this committee today. I'd like to pass over to Michelle.
I believe there are shortfalls in the legislation that enables Tusla to escape prosecution when it fails to protect the children that it has taken into state care. Tusla was set up under the CFA Act 2013 and took over child welfare and protection from the HSE on the 1st of January 2014. The agency is bound by the 1991 Childcare Act. Its business name, registered with the Company Registration Office, is Tusla. And the nature of this business is registered with the CRO. It states that Tusla is a name used by the Child and Family Agency established under statute under the Child and Family Agency Act 2013. The Child and Family Agency is now the dedicated state agency responsible for improving well-being and outcomes for children. The Child and Family Agency seek to register the name Tusla as a business name to demonstrate that the name is associated with the agency. Under the function of the agency set out in Section 8 of the 2013 CFA Act, it says its function of that agency is to support and promote the development, welfare and protection of children. In my opinion, Tusla is a business registered to promote the welfare and protection of children, and therein lies the crux of the matter: promotion of child welfare and protection falls short of the responsibility of providing child welfare and protection. My understanding is that Tusla is not a child protection agency in law. It is a promotion company for child protection and welfare. The Minister with responsibility for children has powers under Section 69 of the 1991 Childcare Act to investigate Tusla and authorises HICWA to carry out investigations on their behalf to ascertain whether Tusla is complying with the national standards for child welfare and protection. However, Section 69 of this Act does not legislate for sanctions when Tusla is non-compliant. We believe that Section 69 of the 1991 Childcare Act needs to be amended to give the Minister powers to sanction Tusla when it fails to protect children it has taken into care and places them in harm's way. Furthermore, we believe that Section 3 of the 1991 Act and Section 8 of the 2014 Act need to be amended to make Tusla fully responsible for child welfare and protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much for them in-depth opening statements, in fairness. I have a couple of questions, but I'm known to be a very fair chair, so I'm going to let the other deputies start, and I'll ask Deputy McGrath first, please.
And thanks for allowing me in. And I say, Kate Falter, good day enough, or to welcome Anna Kavanagh and Finbar Markey and Eilish Monaghan, and to thank them sincerely for the ongoing work that they have done on behalf of the most vulnerable children in our community and indeed our country. And the Constitution states that we must cherish all children equally, and they're fighting a crusade with many, on behalf of the many mothers and some fathers to get objective and honest and proper care for their children, and indeed some cases where they feel that children have been wrongfully taken away from them, and all the in-camera rule and everything else. It's a huge challenge. First of all, I have to put on record that I have absolutely no faith whatsoever in Tusla. Absolutely zilch. And I want to put that on record of the meeting here today. And when it was set up, in the Oireachtas I was spoken, it had literally hived off a corner of the HSE and appointed up this organisation. No thought, no planning, no proper checks and balances, and we have the results of it today. To think that 22 children in January this year went missing in state care. 22 children in January this year in state care. Ms Kavanagh outlined a number of press reports, and I thanked those members of the press. She mentioned Katie Holland and others for the work that they have done, because this is completely under wraps, and the in-camera rule in the court needs to be examined, because the parents and advocates, they have no rights whatsoever, and it's only proper that, and I thank you and the Petitions Committee for hearing them today on this petition, to see if they can bring some clarity and some distinction to some I suppose element of fairness to families and our people. We're talking dolly here in Shanadori. We're messengers of the people, and it's our duty. But the state has failed these people. Not only is it failing them, but it's victimising them. And the figures quoted there, the amount of money spent in private providers, and some of those private providers had no when children were handed into those providers and given and allowed unvetted people to take charge of them. That's appalling. I'm involved in so many, not anymore, but I'm still involved in some clubs and organisations. And the Garda vetting process is applicable to every person on so many different organisations. And some people have to do it 4 and 5 and 6 times. And to think that we would be paying vast sums of money to private entities that haven't proper procedures, haven't people who are vetted, it's just beggars belief. And apart from the committee here today, the testimonials here today, I've been contacted numerous cases all over the country. Horror. In the middle of the night, in the middle of the evening. And I was even told by Superintendent one time, now retired in Clonmel, 10 years ago, that this was really out of hand because, you know, they might be dealing with cases for during the week, the Gardaí, Tusla and social workers. But quite honestly, they said to me, social workers want to take the weekend off. So they call in the Gardaí at 3 o'clock on Monday and take the children out of the houses. And that came from the mouth of an acting superintendent. That's one of the cases. But I have come across cases where Tusla employees are arrogant, they're uncaring, and they're downright belligerent. And, you know, I know of a family where two Tusla workers, where a man, an adult, was charged that there's an order that he couldn't be with his own children on his own. The whole lot has since been totally dropped in court and only prosecuted after several court cases. And if we're a Tusla official, two of them, one in particular, said in front of his mother and other siblings and other people that were there as helpers in that family, appointed, dedicated people, that you all think this man is guilty, and left him. They're not judged. No court of law had found that gentleman guilty. Outrageous comments, and I've heard that numerous times as well. So it's quite disgusting and quite out of control. And the more they're out of control, the more they can do, and the more they can destroy families, destroy lives, and destroy people. And I get calls in the middle of the night from people that have. I attended a press briefing this morning where, you know, they can go into a schoolyard, 2 or 3 squad cars in the middle of a school day and pick up children and the instructions of Tusla in front of their classmates and children. It cause fear. Can you imagine 3 squad cars arriving into the schoolyard and taking away children like that when the mother goes to pick them up at 3 o'clock, they're gone? Appalling behaviour. Appalling behaviour. And think that our state and our ministers could stand up recently, Minister O'Gorman, and say that Tusla was an excellent organisation, top marks, with all the complaints that he knows. And the countless number of times that my colleague, Deputy Durkin, has raised this in the Dáil, and other people as well, including Deputy Tobin and Deputy Paul Murphy and many others. But not enough of us, not enough of our colleagues are challenging the system here. And this system across the HSE, as I said, was just an adjunct of the HSE, hived off and given all these powers, draconian powers. So I think the ask from our testimonial today is very simple. We have to have powers. Like Hikma can close down nursing homes and have closed down many situations, but that's physical buildings because of endangering health or endangering maybe people's safety. But this is where the children are going missing, and we saw that expose from the examiner of the children being picked up out of care and brought into a hotel and, you know, more than likely brought in for to be sexually exploited. It's a horror story. And the sooner that this government deal with that, the better, or the administration. Our state has failed these people so much, and I, from the bottom of my heart, again, thank the 3 people for testimony here today, and ask them what do they feel, how we as a committee, how we as public representatives can get some justice, and what actions we need to take here in this Oireachtas, albeit in the last months of its existence. But you know what, and what can we do to try and ensure that the next Oireachtas take this up and deal with it wholeheartedly? So I'd like to ask them if they have any questions or any suggestions for what we might do. But I again salute them for their testimonies and their dedicated hard work on behalf of the children, the young people, and children even unborn yet. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Deputy McGrath. Thank you for actually not going over your time when we said time was vital.
Thank you.
Do you want to make a comment on that?
Yes, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Deputy McGrath, Deputy Bernard Durkin, Deputy Peadar Tobin, Deputy Rada Cronin and Deputy Paul Murphy, who have done amazing work in raising awareness about the lack of justice for birth mothers and their children in the Dáil Chamber. You mentioned there about the Garda Sergeant, what he told you. Garda Superintendent. Well, I did 20 interviews last year with 20 mothers, and then I got 20 ladies to do the voiceovers for a series called Justice for Birth Mothers. And it was our way of operating around the in-camera rule to give a voice to some of these mothers that felt brave enough to actually trust me and to speak about what was happening to them. And one of the things that came across speaking to the mothers is the guards using their powers to take children. One mother was going to pick her children up at school, and when she got to the school, her children were gone. She wasn't aware of the fact that there had been an ex parte court hearing earlier in the day, and the guards arrived at the school and took her children. One grandmother told me that her children were playing in the garden with their friends when the social workers arrived to take the children. The children were screaming, bawling, roaring, and they ran around the garden. And it was just horrendous and horrific what happened. And the kids screaming and roaring as they were put into the car and driven away by the social workers. Now, there's almost 6,000 children in care. And in the Alliance, we do accept that there are cases of neglect where children need to be taken into care. But we represent the mothers who are desperate to get their children home, and that runs to several hundred mothers. And I suppose, as I said, there's 6,000 children in care, give or take, at the minute. But we never actually stop to think the process of how those children were actually taken into care. One mother telling us that her child ran around a block of apartments with the social workers running after her, and they eventually caught hold of her and bundled her into a car, and she was screaming and roaring. But to me, the most appalling and disgusting thing of all is the removal of newborn babies from mothers who have just given birth. The mother will have been told ahead of the birth that they're going to go for a care order as soon as the baby is born. The files in the hospital will be emblazoned on them, Tusla baby. This is even before the child is born or the baby is born. And, one mother described how she had to walk a mile to the courthouse 2 days after she gave birth, and she was actually breastfeeding her baby. She had to stand around all day in the court while the criminal cases were heard before her case was called in for a hearing. And Tusla was granted a care order, and she was told to have her baby ready for 2 o'clock the following day. And she went back up to the hospital, and her curtains were pulled back. She had to breastfeed in public, no privacy. And the following day, she had to bathe and dress her baby and put it into a carry tot. So the security man came up onto the ward at 2 o'clock at the appointed time and brought her down to the back door of the hospital, where there was a car running with 2 social workers in it. And she had to place the carry tot in the back of the car, and the social workers drove off with the baby in the back of the car. And she was immediately discharged, and absolutely no supports. Now, you would not do that to an animal. I come from a farming background myself, and we know...
Sorry, no, Ms. Kavanagh, for cutting across you, but I'm conscious of time and others want to get in again.
Oh, sorry.
So it's just up to 5 minutes, but you certainly come back in again.
Yes, thank you.
You can just finish that little piece if you want
yes.
to, yeah?
So, what I would say is that we have to actually look at how these children are taken into care. It's an abomination. It's like something that happened in history, but people have got to be aware that it's actually happening today.
Thank you, Ms. Kavanagh. I just wanted to let Deputy Durkin, and you can come back in after then if you want to. Deputy Durkin there.
I'm not a member of the committee, but thank you for allowing me to speak for a short few moments and in support of the women and the cases that have already been made. But particularly I want to emphasise the importance of the rights of the child, and the rights of the child to be heard, and the child's interest to be kept to the fore in all cases of litigation and without litigation. I think that it's no harm to remember that in this country to ensure and fortify the rights of the child. I think it was necessary. That referendum was passed by the people. It was passed for a good reason, because it was observed that the rights of the child in a changing world needed to be strengthened. And I think that was done, but it hasn't manifested itself in practice to the extent that it was intended. So I can only thank those of you who have carried this campaign forward, brought this campaign forward, and spoken out on the basis of the need to change the system, change the law, and bring the law into line with the Constitution in these circumstances. Lastly, I want to just say that thank all of you who have advocated in the press on this particular issue, and colleagues Matthew McGrath, others in the House, and to thank them for persisting with the case. I think because of the fact that concerns have been expressed by so many people, which would point to what is seen as injustice, failure to observe due process and natural justice. And I think that has to be addressed. I think the Minister is also looking at changes in the law at the moment and published the expert opinions on these matters in the last couple of days. I think that this will be fundamental, in my mind, in making it possible to try to ensure that your concerns are addressed and the concerns of many, many more. And also to recognise the fact that, you know, we have all heard and dealt with the cases of children, mothers, and in some cases fathers, who find themselves isolated and ostracised by the children for months at the behest of the system.
Sorry, Deputy Durkin, do you know that your camera is off as well? Can you turn on your camera, please?
Sorry about that. All the cameras are now. To recognise the necessity to pursue the case at every level, pursue the cause at every level, and to vindicate the concerns expressed by those people who have be the children or mothers or in some cases fathers, to vindicate their concerns and their treatment as they have expressed it to you, to all of us, and in the hope that something may be done. I'm confident that we are coming to a position now where something is going to be done, but we will have to remain to be vigilant and try to ensure that the battle continues at this time, as you, the people who are the victims, and those you see as being victims, are satisfied that justice is being done to the extent warranted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Deputy Durkin. And before I let Deputy McGrath, just to say that this committee is very non-political, which we're very proud of. The fact that this is your last chance.com committee and everybody's entitled to have their say. And I'm very proud to say, with the work of all the committee members and the secretariat and the researchers and stuff, it's one of the committees where we actually do get results, and sometimes we get them really quickly. So I would be saying, you know, that we don't like, you get a lot of committees that are, you know, geared like you think that they're a talking shop, but this one actually gets results, and I like that. And I am actually delighted that you came in here to raise these concerns today, because, as I said, this is the forum for it. And before I let Deputy McGrath, can I just ask one question? Because I was taken back by it in the opening statement when you stated that the birth mothers are met by the invisible iron fist of Tusla. No, that's a red flag straight away, you know. And you said that Tusla social workers, when they notify Tusla management about failures to comply with the national standards for children in foster care. If you were blunt and explained that, could you give me, you know, a blunt, no, remind you when I say blunt, but don't be that blunt because we are in public session, but just a blunt explanation on when you mean by an iron fist. Is it the dismissive? Is it it's not your job, it's none of your business, go away, or is it all?
I will. When we say an iron fist, we don't usually mean physical violence, although the physical taking of a child is an act of physical intervention. The iron fist is usually administrative in nature. I'll give you an example. I will do everything my best not to identify anybody in this. As a social care practitioner, a 17-year-old girl became pregnant in a service that I worked in. I attended a meeting one day where it was announced to us that the social work team had decided that this child, 6 months before the child was born, was going to go into care. What was read out next was a report that was completely falsified, that stated that this particular girl, whilst in our residential care, for 5 weeks did not take the child, this is later on at a secondary meeting, did not take the child to the hospital to be seen. And that was the reason that the absolute decision was then being made to take the child into care. That was a falsified report. It would have been our duty to take that baby down to the hospital if the baby was sick, which the baby was not sick. I sat at a table with 5 other professionals who all knew that this was untrue, but kept nodding their head. And the reason was it was a private company that we worked for. And they depended on the contracts and the checks from this social work team. So no matter what injustice, no matter what breach of people's personal rights or law occurred, it would never be raised by professionals who had gone through an academic process which taught them and inculcated them to raise these issues and to follow their values that they were taught in college. So the iron fist has a gentle visual about it, that it's a piece of paper quite often, but it is so damaging. Another example of the iron fist is the use of funding as an excuse for everything. We don't have the funding, that's why X, Y, or Z. Funding had nothing to do with falsifying that document. Funding had nothing to do with most of the things that mothers come to us about and that are not measured by HICWA, because HICWA looks at statistics, quantitative data, a desktop operation, but they don't hear the genuine, horrific stories from mothers and from quite often from fathers as well quite often. That's not, there's on both cases here. So the fist is an administrative one, and yet it can be the most damaging. If somebody hits somebody a punch in the face, you can get over that. But if somebody drags you through a court, tells lies about you, destroys your persona within your community. We have known mothers that have taken their lives because of these processes, and fathers who have taken their lives. And it is gut-wrenching to witness it, so to go through it must be something horrific. I personally was in an orphanage for 4 years, and I can tell you how that impacts, and I'm an educated and a balanced man, but how that impacts your personality development from day one until the day you die in terms of how you feel about yourself in the world. Because you will, as a baby and as a child, you don't see that the system did this. You think your mother did this, that your mother handed you up willy-nilly, and that follows you through life. And it causes drug addiction into the future, it causes alcoholism, a lack of personal faith in the self, all of those things. So the iron fist is not an actual usual fist of violence. It's administrative processes that are designed to oppress so that the family becomes the problem. So many times working in social care, I've never once come across a case where we try to actually unify a family. Quite the opposite. And whenever a mother was coming down for access with her children, the eyes would be thrown, oh, we have to organise this again, like it's a problem. It's a problem. And that the families become the problem. And yet, so many times, what's not needed is €1 million for this child over 3 years. What's needed is a bit of human understanding, more than anything else. And just to be human beings and to try different things. I know one case of a man who's a friend of mine who's blind. And Tusla put on paper that he could not keep his child because he was blind. We eventually got private assessments done. And the assessors could not believe this man. This man could do everything with no eyes. He could change the baby, he could feed the baby, he could do everything. And they were shocked. But Tusla still were not happy. He put in a complaint 5 years ago. That complaint still isn't sorted out. In fact, that complaint is held against him. That's the problematic. It is cultural wide. You have two types of values, when I said espoused values. You have espoused values, which is what you read on paper, all the really lovely things. But then you have the real beliefs and values that happen on the ground in the place. And HICWA do not assess or collate the data from the real things that happen on the ground. Yeah. It's a desktop operation. Thank you for your time. I
thank you for your answer, and a fairly in-depth answer, I have to say.
Thank you.
And I always have a worry that privatisation is for profit and not for duty of care.
Yeah.
And it seems to be across a lot of departments. But Deputy McGrath, I'll let you back in again.
Care and the comments. Just thank you, Finbar, for being so honest about your own situation and your lived experience. In your mind, and either of you can take this briefly, do you feel that, I know in camera, of course, you're not present, but from the evidence presented to you by the mothers and sometimes the fathers, do you feel that the justices, I don't want to name anyone or inculcate anyone, that they're qualified or have a temperament, to deal with this situation? I'm always looking for a system where retraining and updating of training for justice and normal administrative justice, because everything has changed so much. Do you feel that the justice system and the people on the bench have an understanding of the seriousness of this?
I think, and I'll let Michelle take most of this, but just to make the point, there was a book written in the early 1980s by a guy called Lipsky, and it was called Street Level Bureaucrats, and it was a fundamental reading piece for anybody who wants to study organisations. And he looked at judges, he looked at members of the police departments in the United States and other administrative civil service roles. And he found that with judges, just like with everybody else, they don't even look at their cases till it's put in front of them. They don't give it any detail because they've got 200 cases to deal with over the next week. And so they don't go into any real detail about it. And they always err on the side of officialdom. And officialdom always has the money to present their case through top solicitors, etc. So, for instance, the amount of mothers that can't even appeal a decision, they don't have the money to appeal it. Can't get anybody to take the case on, even though it could be a glaring injustice. And so the judges, to a degree, have their hands tied with time, and like everybody else with everything else. But it takes a judge, like anybody else, to understand that you're dealing with human lives here. And you're dealing with lives that have not yet been destroyed. If you get a guy and he's 50 years old and he's been robbing shops since he was 20, and he has a drug addiction for the last 30 years, you might say to yourself, well, there's no fixing that man to a degree. He's going to be up again. But these are babies. These are just little babies that have their whole life. And that decision that you make, Judge, in this day is so important. And it's so important that when you hear that a mother is not speaking up, ask why not? Why not? So, Michelle, I'll let you.
Yeah, so, Deputy, in relation to judges, we speak on behalf of the mothers that have come to us, and Anna has just spoken about the podcasts that the series that she recorded. From those interviews, the mothers do not feel like they can get good representation in court. A lot of them rely on legal aid and feel it falls short of their needs and their children's needs. We've discussed privately with the mothers, we wonder, should the children actually have legal separate representation? But that's another avenue. But at the end of the day, the mothers do not feel represented and sometimes have to represent themselves with no knowledge of the law, but the very simple fact of the matter is whether you're legally trained or the truth, they feel, is not put towards on their file to the actual judge for the judge to adjudicate in a balanced way. So they feel like their story hasn't been given to the court in a balanced, and sometimes a report that has been made about that mother, which falls, Deputy, into that in-camera rule, sometimes they don't see those reports, so how can a mother fight her case in court when perhaps the judge doesn't even realise that mother in front of him has not seen the documentation that Tusla has written about that mother.
Thank you. Just one brief question for me.
Yep, okay.
Have you looked at the experience in other European countries, comparable situations, maybe Northern Ireland or other European countries?
Deputy, Earlier this year, legislation was brought in the UK that has lifted the in-camera rule, so that presently the in-camera rule is gone in over half the family courts in England and Wales. So that is something that really needs to be done here in Ireland. And just to pick up on your point about justice and the courts, Ellen Coyne did a report earlier this week in the Irish Independent. Tusla appears to be, in my opinion, a law unto itself. Tusla is in breach of 6 High Court orders to provide specialist care for vulnerable teens. Now, if I fail to comply with a High Court order, I will deem to be in contempt of court, and if I fail to purge my contempt, I will end up in jail. Now, one of the mothers of one of the children actually brought a case to the High Court in April to have Tusla be found to be in contempt of a High Court ruling to provide specialist care for her son. But the judge in that particular case actually rejected her appeal. So, as we speak, Tusla is currently in contempt of 6 High Court orders to provide specialist care for vulnerable teens. And the other thing is Finbar has spoken up about what the social workers have done. Now, the registration body for Tusla is Coro, and it was the subject of a primetime RTE Investigates programme by Barry O'Kelly last year. And one of the things that he uncovered is that Tusla is the body that's supposed to regulate psychologists, but it actually hasn't taken the moves to do that. So currently anybody can call themselves a psychologist, and they can go into court and they can present expert reports, and the judges then are actually making their judgments based on these expert reports that are coming from people that are not actually qualified. And we're all familiar with Morris, McCabe and Tusla and the copy and paste, it was all dealt with in the Charlton Tribunal in 2017. The social workers involved, the 3 social workers involved, actually didn't come before Coro until December 2023. That's over 6 years later. And Coro then decided that they were going to carry out this investigation in private. So the whole thing is that there is actually no transparency, and there doesn't appear to be any accountability for Tusla when they fail to protect children. And we actually have a situation earlier this year in February, where Minister Roderick O'Gorman, the Minister with responsibility for children, at Tusla's celebration of 10 years in existence, actually stated, according to Jack Power in a report in the Irish Times, he stated that Tusla never caused him or the government a moment of concern. And that's really alarming, given that retired judge, Mr. Justice Sims, had sent 4 reports to Roderick O'Gorman voicing his concerns about issues relating to children in state care. And also, we had the UCD report in June of 2023, a very comprehensive report, I might add.
UCC, was it?
UCD, yes, where children in residential care were being trafficked by predatory males into the sex industry. Deputy Pather Tobin in February here in the Dáil raised the situation with one child who had gone missing, and she was missing for 14 months, and she was actually found in a brothel, locked up in a brothel. So these are the kind of issues that we're dealing with. And then when mothers complain... Yes?
If you don't mind, I'm just
Thank
conscious
you.
of time, but I will say, as we'd say in Cork, the wealth of knowledge is there, and I mean, you've been very definitive on it, and I thank you for that. I'm just conscious. Deputy Durkin, do you want to come in on anything specific?
Chairman there, and thank you for the opportunity again. I just want to point out that in fairness, Tusla is bound by the in-camera rule, and anything that is affected by the in-camera rule in any other quarter is restricted. So it's not possible to get the degree of information or to challenge those who may have questions to answer in cases where the camera rule applies. But the Minister has now, in relation to that last point that was made, has indicated a change in the qualification of those who are allowed to become expert witnesses in family law. I think that will have a big bearing on the kind of things that we've been talking about. And the last point I want to make is the thing that brought this thing to my attention in the first place, of children having been torn away from their mother and being effectively arrested and put in custody of somebody else. There's nothing as heartrending as a mother who sees her child or her children being taken away, handed into somebody else's custody, particularly if she has fears for their safety. And it isn't sufficient to say, look, there's no need to worry, they will be quite safe. That does not reassure in those cases. The maternal instinct or the maternal bond is the strongest bond known in the human world, in the animal world, and I think we have to respect that. But the fact of the matter is I think that we are coming to the situation now that something is about to be done, and I hope that it is. And I will continue to support those who are involved in and continue to pursue these objectives. I have to leave, Chairman, unfortunately. I have another issue coming up, and I wish you well.
No bother, and thank you very much, Deputy Durkin. In your opening statement, again, I go back to the opening statement, and you read out a considerable amount of news headlines and stuff, and in fairness, I want to put on the record, sometimes journalists get a bit of a bashing, and I've always said, because you mentioned it there a while ago, and when you were talking about, it's about getting to the truth and getting accountability and transparency, and I've said it so many times on committees, two of the most difficult things that I find in this country to do is actually help people and tell the truth, because that's when you actually get punished. And you mentioned one of the whistleblowers cases, and even the short time I've been here, I've worked on a protected disclosure law, and fortunately enough, with agreement from Minister McGrath and others, that we actually reversed the burden of proof to try and make things a bit easier and more transparent. But I would say as well, this has really, really opened my eyes, and I do think this is why this committee is so important. I mean, my head is going at 100 miles an hour here saying, well, we have so much more to do now. We actually have so much more to do now. And I just want to say thanks to all of you for coming in here today. It's been extremely, extremely beneficial, because sometimes we're coming in here, we don't know what way it's going to go. But it is a wonderful platform for people to come out and say, look, there's something wrong. We need to fix it. Thus, it is a public place, and this is where you should be. So I just want to say, on behalf of the committee, thank you very, very much for coming in here today. And if you want to say any closing remarks, please do. Thank you.
Chair,
Yeah, Dr. Markey.
Just say one thing, Chair. In terms of the types of sanctions that we would like to see HICRA empowered to enforce on Tusla, we're not talking about financial sanctions. That would be ridiculous. That would compound other problems. What we're talking about, if there's a repetitive behaviour on the part of a member of staff, whether it's falsification of information, whether it's manipulation of processes, as an example with judges, I've come across so many cases of a case is up in front of a judge and the judge is actually erring towards the family. Overnight, and they'll only tell the mother the night before, they'll say, we moved your case. It's now down in a different county with a judge that they know will go with them. They're highly manipulative. In those instances where this is provable, we would like to see HICRA being able to direct Tusla to demote that member of staff or to sanction that member of staff. Because as an expert in organisational culture, one of the most powerful things to keep order in an organisation is myth. If I come to work in a new place and I hear there's a fella 6 months ago and he manipulated information and he was taken to the guards, he was fired and he was taken to the guards, the rest of them won't do it.
Yeah, it works.
That's completely lacking within Tusla.
Yeah, no, and I thank you again for your fairness and bluntness in it, because we have it on with the Mental Health Commission and other issues, and it's now starting, we're seeing this pattern of, we seem to have gone around in a circle to the stage where we need to claw back our accountability and responsibility, but there also has to be extremely strong repercussions. You need a major, and I mean a major slap on the hand for doing this stuff, and I cannot understand it, because it seems to go across disability services, mental health services, that there seems to be a lack of accountability. But what we'll say is, we will certainly be following this up. Yes, go on, Ms. Kavanagh.
I'd like to thank the committee for giving us the opportunity to appear before you. We really, really do appreciate it, but more importantly, the mothers whose voices are denied because of the in-camera rule, they are so, so grateful to you. And finally, we're going to be coming up to an election pretty soon, either in the autumn or after Christmas, and we will know if individual TDs and political parties are serious about giving justice to mothers and their children, if they make it part of their election manifesto. And those who will be sitting down to negotiate the next programme for government. I know fears that if this committee is still going after the next election, you'll be back again. Oh, thank you.
No, you certainly will. As I said, look, we'll consider what the next steps are to it. We know that there's legislative changes that you can do. Again, you can see, because our heads will be 100 miles an hour on this, but I do thank you very, very much for coming in here today. It was certainly an eye-opener, and it's a wonderful opportunity to get the stuff out on the table. I hope that the press that are here listening today will carry on this story, and I'll suspend the meeting now for 5 minutes so the witnesses can leave. So this meeting is suspended.